Hello and welcome to Game Theory. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. Today, it's time. We're going to talk a little bit about expectations for teams in the Eastern Conference. We're going to do the Western Conference later this week. And we're going to talk not about whether or not those are reasonable expectations, whatever. We're going to talk about how those teams can exceed those expectations this season. We'll break down a little bit of news and notesy kind of stuff at the top here. Stephen Curry's extension, Ivica Zubac's extension, etc. But first, let's hit the music.
They do have a timeout. Decide not to use it. Way downtown.
Bang! Bang! What's this gonna be? Wow! Are you kidding me?
Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. But if you watch the tape, what you will see completely orchestrated this game. Bryce, what's going on, buddy?
What's up, Sam? Looks like Andrew Schlecht is going to come on the Game Theory Podcast and win our draft according to the poll on Twitter. But I feel pretty good about some of the people that reached out to me via text or other messages complimenting my team. So I will take the results of the poll, but still feel pretty good about how I drafted and how my team ended up.
So I will be completely transparent. So I think that the draft order played like a real role here. I absolutely think that I had no chance to win that thing.
Yeah.
And I appreciate people that voted for me, but I don't think I drafted the best team. I honestly thought that you won.
Thank you.
When we went through.
Appreciate it.
I thought that you had selected the best team. I understand voting for Andrew's team, a team that I also loved. The Halliburton, Edwards, Jalen Williams trio at the top is about as good as you're going to do for me.
Yeah.
Like, I feel pretty good about that.
Yep.
But yeah, I thought that your mix of Maxey plus you get Paulo and Victor, it's kind of a really well-spaced court for Paulo. You know, you get the defense, you get a lot of the off. I kind of thought that yours was like the best balanced team when we went through it.
I appreciate it. No, that's what.
So
it was fun. At the end of the day, it was fun. We enjoyed it. And it kind of was, I thought it would be a really good cap to the series we did with the under 24. So I thought it worked out well.
It also gave me a couple of ideas. That will not be the last draft we do this preseason. We will almost certainly do like a 25 to 29 draft and then probably an over 30 draft as well. I'm thinking before the season gets going here. I kind of like the idea of maybe even doing that like next weekend. We will see, because we actually don't have anything slotted in for that 9-8 window there right now, the September 8th window when I'll be in Gold Coast. So that's kind of a good slot. Also, to close the loop on Oasis and the fact that Bryce does not know who Oasis is, I would like you to explain to me that the people around you also do not know who Oasis is. So I might be willing to even go as far as to say this could have been a failure of the Kansas radio system to not introduce Oasis to you. So Bryce, go ahead.
So I text my sister, do you know the band Oasis? She responds, the ones that sing Wonderwall. If so, I know some of their songs. I said, yes, but not crazy familiar. And she said, haha, no, why? I said, I'm getting cooked on Twitter. And here's her. People are going to hate my sister more than they hate me now. They were like a one-hit wonder, I feel, and that was before your time, wasn't it?
Bad take. Bad take on it being a one-hit wonder. They have like 2 albums that are like all-time Stone Cold classics. But continue.
To the point of like just not knowing who. Chris, who you know, I text him, friend since high school. Do you know Oasis? Yeah, I know Wonderwall. Why? Because of the TV show Lost. I said, do you know any of the other songs? No.
Yeah.
Look,
was it. I think that this is a failure. You know, you said your wife like had no idea who Oasis was.
So this is how my night ended last night. Was me and my wife laying in bed, and she's going through one Oasis's greatest hits, playing every song to see if we recognize them at all. I told you, Wonderwall. Now that I've heard it, I do know it.
Yeah.
The others, none. So I text our friends across the street, grew up Western Kansas, around the same age. Do you guys know the band Oasis? I know a couple of their songs. I said, people on Twitter are amazed I don't know who they are. He said, I had to go to YouTube to be sure. And his wife said, nope, maybe heard the name with the, I don't know, emoji.
What happened here is a failure of the Kansas radio system. And we need to make sure that there is more British music getting into the Kansas radio system, as opposed to that country music that you guys have full time.
2 stations growing up, 97.3, 98.1. And as I was growing up, they only played country music. That's all we got. That was it. As I started to get older, 98.1 started to play some other music, a little more well-rounded, but I grew up only listening to country. Like that was legitimately it until probably 8th grade, middle school, starting high school. And then Chris introduced me to hip hop. And that's when I got into Tupac and Nelly and Eminem and 50 and all of that.
And then you ended up going to American, where I would imagine there was quite an influence of hip hop on a basketball team at American University.
Well, and I was junior college before that. So yeah, like I definitely was in that realm. I don't, but I got made fun of at American too, because of my lack of culture and understanding of things. Sam, I never flew a plane until I went on my official visit to American. I had barely left I'd been to Kansas, the panhandle of Texas, Denver, Colorado, and that was it.
To be fair with that, so like I'd been to Florida, I'd been to Atlantic City, I've a little bit, but like I didn't leave the country until like of the United States. And look, I live in Australia now, but like I didn't leave the country until what? I was probably 20. 20 maybe. Yeah. Something like that. So I'm with it. I get that piece of it.
Here will blow your mind even more. My dad had never flown on a plane until my official visit also. So, I was 20. My dad is way older than me. I'm the baby. My dad was 50 something the first time he ever flew.
Have you left the United States?
I did. So we went to Vlad, my teammate at American. He was playing in Venice, or he was playing in Italy. And so I went over to Italy when he was playing to watch him. And then my wife and I went to the Dominican for our honeymoon. I mean, that barely counts, but
yeah, like for instance, like my parents like just got their passports, right, to come visit me here. And they're in their 60s. Yeah. So like totally, I think people in the United States generally probably don't travel enough. So I'm like, that's one thing like I won't really make fun of people for in general. But okay. Now that we have properly, I don't even think we roasted Bryce a little bit there. I think we came to an understanding about the unfortunate situation that is the Kansas radio, radio station monopoly in Kansas and Western Kansas particularly. So what are we doing today? We're doing in a podcast where we talk about expectations for each team and how they go about exceeding it. But before we do that, I want to first talk about some news and notes that happened over the weekend. First, this is one where we probably won't spend a crazy amount of time, but Stephen Curry has signed a 1-year extension with the Golden State Warriors. That now puts him under contract with the Warriors, I believe through 2028, correct?
Yes, 26, 27.
2027. That's right. So I think that this was just as simple as it could be in terms of, hey, let's get this guy locked in. He's their only guy, I think, that has a definite for sure contract in 2026, 27. I believe that both Draymond and Andrew Wiggins have player options.
Correct.
Look, as of right now, I think both of those players would be likely to exercise those player options, but very much a situation where Steph is the guy that they're building around still. And I think that they want to continue to go down that road. I don't believe that this impacts, like if they did want to move Stephen Curry, like we'll talk about this with Zubac, right? Mm-hmm. I actually don't believe this impacts Steph's ability to be traded. I don't think that his contract increases by more than the amount that allows him to be moved if they so wanted to. Not to say that they're going to move Steph or anything, but like if the wheels were to come off or anything, I don't think it changes their flexibility in the same way that the Lowry Markkanen extension did, for instance, with Utah, right? But having said that, look, the Warriors now have Stephen Curry under contract for 37% of the cap in 2026-27. Just a deal that you always make with Steph, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think my interesting thing here is like, when does this fall off for Steph, right? We talk about it all the time with LeBron and how old he is and how long he's going to be able to play. And there's other players as well. Steph, this is age 36 season. And so now you're looking at age 38 season for him. And I think it'd be interesting, how does his game translate as he starts to lose a step? Obviously the shooting probably stays forever, but does the stamina stay for that long? A huge part of his game is running off these screens or driving and kicking and then sprinting back out to the 3-point line. And he already defensively, there's some things you have to work around with him on the defensive end. So at some point, everybody is going to start to fall just a little bit. When does that end up happening for Steph? And so I'm not questioning the move. I'm not saying they shouldn't have done it. It is interesting. This will actually be a smaller percentage of the cap in 26-27 than even this year or next year for Steph, even though it is up to 62.5. And then one final thing, just looking at contracts that year, Melton and Payton are off. Kyle Anderson has 0 guaranteed on that year. Hield has $3 million guaranteed. And if you look, he has a player option the next year, but it's 0 guaranteed. So, Hield wouldn't have to be on the roster. And then you just have the young guys. So the books beyond that are, obviously clean after that year. But yeah, I mean, it's Steph Curry. And like you said, I would assume if they wanted to trade him, this would be fine for a team to bring him in. Totally. Like if you're bringing in Steph Curry, it's to be a dude. And so you're going to pay him like a dude. Like that would be your expectation, is you're gonna have to pay real money for it.
Yeah. To me, this is just what you do with your, organization's best player in history, right? You take care of him, you make sure he's locked in for as long as you can, and you go from there. Right. He's now he is going to be subject to the over 38 rule at that point. And, I think that they're probably going, 1 year or whatever at this point. But, I'm excited to see what Steph is capable of when he's 38 years old, because we have not seen any slowdown from him at this point. Next, TJ McConnell has signed a 4-year, $45 million extension with the Indiana Pacers. That means that his contract, he is now locked in for the Pacers for 5 years. So 5 years, $54 million, essentially, for TJ McConnell. Before we talk about what this means for the Pacers, and I do think it's worth kind of noting what it means for the Pacers in their long-term kind of flexibility and plans moving forward. But to me, this is like a totally reasonable deal for a guy that has turned into one of the best backup point guards in the NBA. These are the kind of stories that I love. Guys who go from being undrafted free agents, who are undersized, who a lot of people don't believe in, your Fred VanVleets, your TJ McConnells, and who end up getting substantial, significant payments throughout the course of their NBA career. Now, this is going to lock in TJ McConnell for his NBA career to about $90 million, depending on how much of this is guaranteed. I don't know how much of this is guaranteed, based off the early reporting. It seems like quite a substantial amount of it. I would imagine that quite a substantial amount of it is guaranteed. But if all of this deal is guaranteed, he's going to make $90 million in his NBA career. That's fucking awesome. Shout out TJ McConnell.
Yeah. And I mean, we can talk about the number and his age and things like that, but I feel like this really came off what he did in the playoffs. I feel like he was really good in the playoffs, and he gets to the paint all the time. He has the little mid-range pull up. Obviously, he works his tail off on the defensive end, even if there, are maybe some size limitations with matchups and those type of things. The regular season numbers don't just wow you, but even in the regular season, he was 7th in 6 men of the year voting. So it's not like it was just a really good year for him. I will say, Sam, he's a little older than what I realized. We're entering age 32 season. This is 4 more years. SpotTrack it just has estimates, so it's not saying what's guaranteed, what's not. I think I would feel a little more comfortable if maybe there's not full guarantees as we get to the tail end of it.
Yeah.
But just as the number, you're way below the MLE throughout all of this. And if he can stay even a top 7 backup point guard in the league, that's more than worth it for that type of player.
Yeah, so TJ McConnell had his best season of his career last year.
Yes.
Averaged 10 points per game, shot 56, 41, 79 from the field, averaged 5.5 assists versus 1.5 turnovers. The thing with him is that the athleticism isn't really going. If you look at like his drives per game, right? Like he's consistently among the league leaders in drives per minute played, right? Like he just always gets to the paint. He's always kind of wreaking havoc and creating that weird kind of tempo that he's able to somehow. It's weird that he gets into the paint as much as he does. It's the easiest way to put it, but he does. He just knows how to live there.
Is it crazy to call him a walking paint touch? I feel like he was a walking paint touch every game I watched. It was crazy.
Yes. No, he really is. He is a walking paint touch. He's a good defender. Like he brings a lot of value to the table. It really just depends on how long the athleticism ends up holding up for him.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I would hope that there are probably some non-guarantees near the back end of this deal. The last year particularly, I think could be a little bit dicey. That would be like an age 36 season.
Yes.
But man, his footwork is unbelievable. He knows how to play in ball screens, the passing ability, the decision-making, the defense. Like he's a really, really valuable player. Now, it is a little bit interesting what this means for the Pacers kind of moving forward. So this coming off season, as of right now, I believe that they have like somewhere between like 168 to 170 million guaranteed for Tyrese Halliburton, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith, Pascal Siakam, TJ McConnell, Obi Toppin, Ben Shepherd, Ben Mathurin, Johnny Furphy, Jarris Walker,
7,
right?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's 10 guys right there that they have like under contract, right? That does not include Miles Turner.
Nope.
Right?
Unrestricted free agent.
The tax threshold for that season is something like, we're going to call it like 188 million, like right in that ballpark is what is expected to be the luxury tax threshold. I'm assuming Miles Turner is going to get around like 30-ish million, let's say, right?
Sure.
Awesome player. I think that there would be no shortage of interest in a big who is one of the best shot blockers in the league, who can also space the court and shoot it a little bit. I would imagine that like he will be among the most sought after free agents in the NBA next offseason.
Claxton got 28 a year, or it's 28 this year. Hartenstein's 30 this year. And those are guys that just signed those this past offseason.
So with where the Pacers cap sheet is heading, they're going to have kind of two choices here. Either A, they're going to have to be like a real luxury tax team, which has been quite rare throughout the course of their history, or B, they're going to have to make some moves around the margins, right? They're going to have to decide, hey, we're not going to extend Ben Mathurin long-term. We don't see him as a long-term piece. We're going to move him. We don't love where that Obi Toppin deal is heading. Maybe after the season, we're going to move him, right? I'm not saying that any of these things are what's going to happen and what reality is, but those are the kind of trade-offs that this Pacers team, having now extended Andrew Nembhard, having extended Obi Toppin, having extended, obviously, Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam and Aaron Nesmith, frankly, that is where the trade-offs are going to have to come now. They don't have the ability to give Miles Turner that crazy balloon payment like they did a couple years ago and then bring the salary down like they were able to. And there are going to have to be trade-offs as they build. And that trade-off could just be paying luxury tax and money from ownership, or it could be that they might have to make some roster moves around this core.
Yeah. And that's, if you don't retain Miles, like the thing with Miles is like, that's the one position I don't know that you have a ton of depth. Like obviously you weren't going to let, Hallie and Pascal like but if you would have let Obi Toppin walk this summer, Sam, you have Jarris Walker right there to step into it. There's not another starting, there's not another center who I think you would say, oh, that guy's going to turn into a starting center for. Jalen Smith left in free agency. It's Wiseman and Isaiah Jackson. And I know we've talked about Toppin playing center off the bench and things like that, but not starting at center. So I guess what I'm saying is there's not a direct replacement. If they let a Benedict Mathurin go, maybe you talk yourself into, okay, well now Johnny Furphy's the next guy in line for that or something like that.
Yep.
With Turner, I just don't see the guy on the roster where you can say, oh, okay, if they lose him, that's going to suck, but they have this young big man to step into the role. That guy's not currently on the roster.
And with the way that they play, I think that they actually really desperately need that floor spacing big, as we'll talk about when we go through the expectations for them moving forward. I think it's really, really important that they have that floor spacing big around Tyrese Halliburton, around TJ McConnell, getting into the paint, driving, consistently being able to get those paint touches. So to me, the McConnell deal, and look, like I'm not saying this is a bad deal at all. McConnell is, and we'll see where the guarantees come in and everything like that. Seriously, you talk to people around the league, like CJ McConnell is beloved, in part because of the stuff I talked about earlier on, right? Where he has worked his absolute balls off to be able to get to where he has gotten to, where he has a chance to make $90 million in his NBA career, right? And where he's 32 years old and just had one of the best seasons, if not very clearly the best season of his NBA career. But this deal does come with some future trade-offs that could occur. And I am intrigued to see how the Pacers handle that moving forward now, because there are a lot of things that could be on the table for them. And it becomes harder from this point, not easier now.
Yep.
The thing that I would be worried about if I was a Pacers fan is you look at what happened when the Hawks made the Eastern Conference Finals a little bit earlier than expectation under Trae Young, Kevin Huerter, DeAndre Hunter missed that playoffs by and large, but like that group of players before they made the DeJounte Murray deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
They ended up paying like all of those guys, like Capella and everything, giving those guys extensions, and they kind of stagnated right now. I think this Pacers team is built way better than that team is in terms of future long-term viability. But like there are comparisons to be made in terms of just, they got there a little bit earlier than expected. They give, Kevin Huerter the extension in Atlanta's case, Andrew Nembhard the extension in the Pacers case, where you and I think that Nembhard extension looks like a great deal, but I thought the Kevin Huerter deal looked like a great deal at the time, and they were able to get a first round pick back, but like they haven't really gotten anything for that at this point yet. They do the Bogdanovich deal. Bogdanovich has turned out really good for them, but it hasn't resulted in wins and losses. And now, they go in, they bring in DeJounte Murray to try and take the leap. They end up sending DeJounte out for cost of not having reached back to those heights, as well as I think like a net loss of 1 first round pick, let's call it something in that ballpark. So it gets harder. My point here is not to say like Pacers fans should be worried. It's just that it gets harder from here, right? Things become more difficult. The Eastern Conference, I think the Pacers probably should be playing for like 2 to 3 years down the road, as opposed to right now. Like 2 to 3 years down the road, you can see a world where, okay, Paul George has aged out, Joel Embiid, has potentially set himself up with some problems injury wise, and Giannis, is starting to age out a little bit. That's kind of what you're hoping for. Right.
Boston either gets too expensive or ages out.
Right. Now, again, like we're not saying that these things are necessarily like 100% going to happen, but if you're Indiana, I think that's the window you're hoping for more than anything. So if I'm them, I understand why you're doing these deals, while also trying to figure out, how do we best set ourselves up for that window. In their case, they have all these interesting young players who are going to continue to grow and mature and get better in Jarris Walker, hopefully. Hopefully Obi Toppin takes another leap. Maybe Mathurin can be the kind of guy that gets better. But with the Toppin and McConnell deals, particularly this summer, they've made the decision-making process, they've sped it up a little bit, is the easiest way to explain it, because now they have to make choices around their core with Miles Turner, with Toppin, with, Nembhard, with Mathurin, with Jarris Walker, because Mathurin is going to be looking for an extension next summer, potentially. If he plays well this year, he's going to want an extension. Miles Turner is a free agent. You're going to have to pay him. So the fact that they're locking into money now is a really interesting situation.
The thing is, you do have a bunch of contracts that are going to be very tradable, though, and could be very easily put together to go get somebody if you wanted. Because you have, even if you just look next year, 14.5 for Toppin, 11 for Nesmith, 10 for McConnell, 9 for Mathurin, 18 for Nembhard. I'm not saying you would trade all of these guys, but let's say they go through this season and they take a step back or something doesn't work or whatever. You can go into the offseason and you have some talented players on good contracts that you could consolidate and go get whatever the piece is that wasn't there. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but you have kind of locked in a group. But within locking them in, you didn't give outrageous contracts that you can't get off of.
Yeah, no, that's right. Okay. The next one we want to talk about is Ivica Zubac. I'm just interested in this deal in a big way. So 3 years and what is it? 59 million?
58.6. Yeah. 59.
Yeah. 59 million. So this deal does essentially stop Ivica Zubac from being traded this year. Because he can't be moved for 6 months after this, and that takes him past the deadline. So Ivica Zubac will be a Clipper for this entire year. And this is a Clippers team that is in, let's call it transition, maybe, right, Bryce? Probably the fairest way to put it.
It's in something, I guess. Yeah. Yeah, sure. I don't know. I don't know what they're in. I'm fascinated.
So I like this deal by and large for the Clippers.
Yeah, sure.
I think he's worth this money. Like Ivica Zubac is a 27-year-old center who was about to hit unrestricted free agency, and you got him for under $20 million a year.
Yep.
Ivica Zubac has turned into, I don't know, like I kind of think there's a case he might be the most underrated center in the NBA. He's a really good defender. He rebounds the hell out of the ball. He's a very efficient finisher on the interior. He's pretty tough. He's a good drop coverage defender. He just brings a lot of like the little things. Like he's a really solid screener. He creates a lot of value for the Clippers. And I think that anytime you can get a guy like this under $20 million per season, average annual value, this is a huge, huge win for the Clippers. It is just really interesting now that they have basically, it's like him, Kawhi, and Derek Jones Jr. under contract for 2026, 27. I guess that like Kobe Brown also has a team option for that year, but in Cam Christie has a team option, and they signed Chris Dunn to that weird 3-year deal that I think has like a non-guaranteed amount in 2026, 27 as well. But by and large, it's Kawhi, Zubac, and Derek Jones under contract, and I think they're under for like 80 to 82 million, like something in that ballpark, in a season where the cap is going to be like 170 million, right? So this is the kind of deal where if they're like quite bad this year and they decide they need to make some weird moves around the margins, they can't really do that with Zubac, but they do have Zubac for 4 years now. They have their center position like pretty locked up on a very reasonable, solid deal. And I don't think this actually really impacts their summer of 2026 plans, if that's kind of what they're going for here. So all across the board, I think this is a really, really good contract for the Clippers that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, Zubac ended up on our top 10 contracts whenever we did that whenever that was. And so he goes from that to making what, $7 more million per year. $7 more million per year doesn't mean all of a sudden he goes overpaid. Maybe he's properly paid. I think I looked average annual value, or next year, I shouldn't say AAV, but next year it would be like 13th paid center in the league, right in there. And obviously like Chet and Wemby and some of those guys are below still on their rookie deals. And so, yeah, I think it's a good contract. My thing with the Clippers is they're going to go try to win games this year. They can't move into a new arena and not do that. So yes, they lost PG-13. We can debate and talk and whatever about why and why didn't they pay and whatever. Everybody's discussed that. My thought, based on their moves of going and getting a Derek Jones Jr. and a Chris Dunn and a Nicholas Batum and all of that was, and not really doing anything else with their guys, is we're going to go try to win and be as watchable as possible this season. And this move just backs it up to me. Zubac is going to be on the roster this year. We're not going to trade him no matter what. And then we will reevaluate next summer. Maybe they were awesome. Maybe Kawhi and James just have career years and only having two and not the third guy works out. Maybe it's a disaster, whatever, but they can deal with Harden's player option and the 2 years left on Kawhi's deal and potentially rebuild next offseason. But there was just no way they were going to do that, even with PG leaving. And so you have he'll still only be 28 next year, Sam, going into his age 28 season on a solid contract, but that has some years on it that would be very attractive to a team if they do want him and to trade him, or if you're resetting and he's part of that reset, you have a pretty good center on a really good deal. Like either way, giving guys good contracts is always good business.
This is kind of how I feel about this deal. Yeah. And look, like, I don't think the Clippers are going to be like bad next year by any stretch. Like James Harden was quite good last year. Kawhi was incredible last year. Again, the thing is that when you have a roster built around an older James Harden, who we've seen kind of wear down later in the year, especially in Philadelphia more than anywhere else, and Kawhi, who, certainly has his injury questions, there's just a lot of variability, I think, in terms of what the wins and losses could be. If you told me the Clippers came out and, James Harden and Kawhi both play 70 games next season, and you have Zubac, who's like this awesome defender, and you have Terrence Mann, you have Derek Jones, and you have Chris Dunn, and you have Nicola Batum, you can sell me on that team winning 48 games, like pretty easily, to be honest with you.
Which almost gets you out of the play-in in the West last season. 49 got you out of the play-in.
Totally. You could also, though, sell me on Kawhi and James Harden both playing 40 games.
Yeah.
And them winning like 35 games.
Well,
to be honest with you.
And what this team does not have is like the young talent that's bringing energy night in and night out and is hungry in the regular season to prove themselves. That I believe those type of players can get you a handful of wins every year, just because those guys still bring it on those nights where maybe the vets are a little worn down or need a night off or whatever. I don't know, maybe Kobe Brown steps up, or Mo Bamba finds his legs there, or Cam Christie's ready, or our guy, my guy, I shouldn't say I shouldn't do this. Jordan Miller comes in and is able to get buckets like he did in the G League and Summer League. But we haven't seen that happen with these young guys in the regular season yet, or Bones Highland. So, but that's why, it could go one way or the other pretty quickly.
Yeah, look, it's just really interesting to try and track to see where this Clippers team goes. To me, they could go in a few different directions. I really enjoy a lot of the guys on this team. Like, people know I've really enjoyed Chris Dunn and his defensive ability for a long time.
Yeah.
Derek Jones Jr. last year was one of the revelations of the league on a minimum contract and becoming a starter on the NBA finalist in Dallas, right?
Yep.
Terrence Mann is another like long time favorite of mine, where I loved him pre-draft and I continue to love him like throughout the course of his career. And, he's hitting free agency, so you would think he's going to be in for a pretty solid year. It's just that there are a lot of outcomes here that could happen depending on Kawhi and James Harden. Those two guys are very, very much the keys to how this thing goes.
Absolutely.
Okay, final bit of news and notes. Gigi Jackson, unfortunately, broke a fifth metatarsal, which is middle of the foot, I believe, bone, while playing basketball. and is going to miss a substantial portion of next season, presumably, at least like a couple of months potentially. Bummer, like huge bummer.
The guy on Twitter, I probably should look it up and give him his due credit, said the average time when this happens in season is 42 games. So, you know, with Jeff Stotts, the in Street Clothes guy that kind of keeps track of this stuff, the history of it in all sports. But for basketball specifically, and he mentioned some guys that have had this. So, 42 games, if you're half the season, if you're in season, obviously we're not in season yet. So sounds like GG's at least going to miss some games, which sucks for GG. You never know when a guy this young misses parts of the offseason, misses training camp. Kind of hard to join a team once they get things going. A team that I think we both think is going to be decent this year. It does open up opportunities from some other players that we've talked about. But yeah, just unfortunate for GG.
So shout out to Jeff Stotts. Jeff is basically the injury goat over on Twitter. Fifth metatarsal injuries are relatively common in the NBA. Average lost game time, like Bryce said, is around 42 games in season. Multiple players have missed substantially more time. Kevin Durant, Zion Williamson, Aaron Gordon, have all suffered these kind of injuries. None of those guys have really, lost a lot, which is a really good sign for GG long-term. And ultimately that's what Memphis cares about. To me, this doesn't really impact a ton for them, if only because you and I think, have been a little bit more skeptical on what GG's kind of impact on Memphis was actually going to be this season. He had a chance to be like a really valuable, like 6th, 7th, 8th man, I think, depending on how their rotation shook out. And I think that Memphis fans should be excited about how his growth has kind of continued over the course of the last, really 12 months. But also, this is a team trying to contend, and GG, played a brand of basketball that there were some question marks about. Let's go with.
Well, and we talk all the time about this team being primed for a consolidation trade. So the other aspect of that is if you suffer an injury, I theoretically have guys that can step in. So like their backup front court is you still have Santi Aldama and Brandon Clark to play there. Maybe this means Jake LaRavia gets a real opportunity early in the season there, where maybe him and GG would have been fighting for minutes. You have Vince Williams still in the second unit, and then the backcourt as well has plenty of depth. So I don't think it necessarily, I'm not trying to put GG down and what it means to him, but I don't think this directly leads to Memphis having a slower start to the season or something like that because he's out. It stinks for him. Great year last year, was excited to see what he was going to do. Maybe it just helps Memphis work through some of these players, and you give these other guys a chance. If they take advantage of it, then you figure it out. If they don't, then when GG gets back, then you try him out.
Yeah. And look, we just are hoping that the Memphis injury curse does not continue
no joke.
this season.
No joke.
Just insane that we're in this place where, again, Memphis already is down a player after the craziness that was last season. So best wishes to GG Jackson as he tries to get healthy. But man, we're just rooting for this Memphis team to hopefully stay healthy this year.
Yep.
Okay. Before we get to the expectation game, I've got to tell you about MANDO. I am going to the Gold Coast on Saturday here to go see the NBL Blitz. And packing is an absolute nightmare. I never know what to pack. I always bring too much. I feel like my suitcase ends up being super heavy. It's really frustrating. But one of the dilemmas that you have to deal with when dealing with packing for a trip is, what hygiene products do you take? Do you bring the tiny bottles of shampoo? Do you bring all sorts of, 4 or 5 different things? Mando's 4-in-1 acidified cleansing bar is the solution that made my life so much easier. This 5-ounce bar is a game changer. It works as a shampoo, face wash, body wash, deodorant, and if you need a shaving lather, it's perfect for that too. It makes it a 5-in-1 product that is clinically proven to control odor for 24 hours. Mando's 4-in-1 acidified cleansing bar is formulated with a gentle alpha hydroxy acid that stops odor at the source. Look, doctors develop these things. I don't totally know. how these things work, but it is real. This bar simplified my hygiene routine and was the only thing I needed to pack this time to go to the Gold Coast on Saturday. And think of all the room I'm going to have in my suitcase in case I want to go shopping up there in Queensland. Comes in it comes in 3 cologne quality scents. The 4-in-1 bar comes in 3 quality scents. Mount Fuji, bourbon leather, or Pro Sport. My personal favorite is bourbon leather. I couldn't get enough of it, but guess what? I've got a special offer. New customers are going to get $5 off Mando's best-selling starter pack with that code GAMETHEORY, GAMETHEORY, at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. I love Mando because it's safe to use anywhere on your body. It's aluminum-free, baking soda-free, cruelty-free, dye-free, vegan. It's safe for every crevice on your body. Mando starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice, and free shipping. So don't miss out. Use code GAMETHEORY at shopmando.com to get $5 off your starter pack. Simplify your travel and stay fresh with Mando. Okay, Bryce, we're ready to go.
Let's do it.
We're going to talk about expectations today for teams in the Eastern Conference. Podcast on Thursday will be Western Conference. So we're not ignoring the Western Conference teams, but we're doing Eastern Conference teams first. What we're going to do and how we're going to set this up is we have a clock. As you guys know, Bryce and I have a tendency to go long on things. So today I have set up.
Pretty sure somebody told us to shut the F up on Twitter the other day.
Yeah, that'll happen. That'll happen. We have a clock. We will talk about these teams for 5 minutes each. If the clock goes off and we're in the middle of a thought, we're not going to stop. If we get to 4 minutes and we're done with Brooklyn or something, we're going to stop. But we're talking for 5 minutes about each of these teams. That is our goal for today. I am ready. Are you ready, Bryce?
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Okay. We're starting the clock. And before we do that, we're going to say at the top what our expectation is for the Atlanta Hawks, or realistically, maybe not what our expectation is, but realistically, what I think the organization's expectation should be to show growth next season, right? You and I can think differently about the Hawks, right?
Sure.
Like you and I probably have different opinions about, what Charlotte should be trying to do, than maybe what the organization has. Chicago, for instance, almost certainly we have different feelings on what they're trying to do. But we're trying to figure out what the organizational expectation should be and how they go about exceeding those expectations.
Okay.
So, okay. Bryce, are you ready?
Let's do it.
We're starting with the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks, to me, their goal is probably right around 6, 7, 8 in terms of hierarchy in the Eastern Conference. 40 wins, 42 wins, 44 wins, something in that market. And to me, the key for them to be able to hit that is if the kids can take the step forward. Can guys like Zachary Rissochet, Dyson Daniels, Onyeka Okongwu actually play into the role that I think that the Hawks maybe under this front office hope that they can be?
So some teams I have a wins number or playoff expectation. For Atlanta, I went a little bit different. Hopefully this is okay, Sam. I just said find the path forward. And by that, I mean, find out who your true young core, find out who your core is. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be young. I misspoke there. It probably does involve Trae Young, but maybe it doesn't. And does it involve, who are the young guys? Is Kobe Buffkin a guy? How good is Jalen Johnson? Can Dyson Jan? So it works hand in hand with what you're saying. But I think a successful season for Atlanta is at the end of this season, hopefully with 40 some wins and at least a first round in the playoffs. Like, you don't go out in the play-in, okay, it's Trey, Jalen, Zach, and Onyeka, and then we'll build out around those four. But if you end the season, you're like, maybe they should trade Trey, maybe they shouldn't, maybe they got some young wings, maybe they don't, still have no idea if Kobe Buffkin is good or not. I think that would be an unsuccessful season in the grand scheme of the organization.
Yeah, to me, you kind of say, figuring out like who their guys are. I completely agree with you. My thing for them is I don't want to go into next offseason with there being a question as to whether or not we move Trae Young.
Yep.
Right.
Sure.
I don't want that hanging over the organization. I want it to be like, okay, the kids are farther away than what we thought. Right. And, Dyson Daniels, the offense isn't quite ready yet. And Risa Shea isn't ready to play in the NBA yet. And Onyeka Okongwu, going from being one of the better backup centers in the league to the starter, that didn't quite work. Or I want it to be, oh man, Jalen Johnson averaged 20 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 assists this year. And Zach Risa-Shea looked like he was able to be the 5th starter already. That's really exciting for us. Dyson Daniels made all defense and is like the perfect complement for Trae Young in the backcourt. I want those answers. And I think the way that they get those answers, and like Kobe Buffkin was able to be the 6th man or the 7th man, who's the 4th guy in the backcourt behind Bogdan Bogdanovic, right? Like, I want to know what the Hawks situation looks like by the end of the year. And to me, what that looks like in terms of exceeding expectations is probably Dyson Daniels making all defense and averaging like 12 points a game or something, 14 points a game. And Zach Risa-Shea averaging double figures and, shooting 45, 35, 75. So like not amazing numbers, but like playable numbers when you account for the fact that he's a pretty good off-ball defender. Onyeka Okongwu stepping into the starting role, like Jalen Johnson really exceeding expectations. That's where I think they can kind of take that leap and know the answer as to whether or not Trey is the guy to build around or not.
And that's, those things, I think we went about it in different ways, but we ended up in the same ballpark of how good are these young guys? And again, if they're going to exceed expectations, it's because those young guys come in and do the things you're talking about. And then you go into the offseason going, we're ready. We find some different veterans or some backup or whatever, but it's Trey and these young guys, and we're moving forward with that. There's no, trade rumors or on the block or whatever. Or the other option is where they wouldn't, do this is, like you said, these guys aren't ready for 2 or 3 years. We might as well move Trey while we're at it because, we're not going to win anything with him anyway because we don't have the roster around him. So I think we went about it in different ways, but we got to the same point. It's these young guys and finding out what they are. And if they are something and are ready, then they're going to exceed expectations and really win some games.
I think that's right. Okay. Number 2, the Brooklyn Nets. To me, this is where the rebuild starts for the Nets, right? And it doesn't seem like they're going to care about wins and losses. They have their picks back from Houston already, right? To me, this year is really all about just, can any of the younger players emerge into just like true building blocks, right? They're going to lose games no matter who they put out there
100%.
On the court this year. It's really about like, can Cam Thomas show that he can play a brand of basketball that is like somewhat useful to winning games? Can Day'Ron Sharpe be a guy that they want to extend and continue on with as the backup big man next to Nick Claxton, or give them flexibility with Claxton to go get other assets, right? Or give them flexibility with Day'Ron Sharpe to go get other assets, right? Can Noah Clowney take that next leap to go from interesting, end of first round pick to guy that can be your versatile kind of 4-man who can knock down shots and do some things? Can Jalen Wilson become a guy that, goes from second round pick to real rotation player that you have under contract, hopefully longer term? Zaire Williams is an interesting guy to like, have as a flyer. To me, it's all about, can any of the younger guys like really emerge into interesting players?
I hopefully this won't be the case for every team, but you essentially read my notes. So I said rebuild, tank, however you want to say it, tank, whatever. I said, sell the vets and find diamonds in the rough. And by diamonds in the rough, I mean exactly what you were saying there, because you don't immediately look at this roster with the guys under 25 and go, oh, really excited about that guy. Really excited about that guy. They have a crazy talented young core. There's some interesting players. Cam Thomas, Day'Ron Sharpe would be at the top of that list for me, but you would like to see that. And so exactly what you said is exactly how I feel. Wins and losses isn't the thing to focus with Brooklyn. Can you find some of those things? And what can you find some of those guys maybe in a Cameron Johnson trade? Like, can you trade Cam Johnson and find, a young player on that team that has gone underutilized or undervalued or whatever, and you bring him in and he becomes something for you as you start to build it out over the next few years. So that's where I'm at with the Nets as well.
But like in the Cam Johnson case, Bryce, like the thing that, for instance, you and I talk about with the Pistons all the time is shooting.
That's true.
Having
That's a good
Cam
point.
Johnson around for
Yes.
potentially Cooper Flagg or whoever next season might be like really useful
Fair
and
point.
valuable for them.
Yes.
So
that's true.
To me, it's all about, okay, which of these guys can be real building blocks. And I agree with you, like trying to sell off, on if Dennis Schroeder can get you something, if Dorian Finney-Smith can get you something, like that's great. Is there any of these guys that you really think you buy? Like, to me, the one I'm probably most interested in is Day'Ron Sharpe. Like, his advanced numbers are quite good. I think that there is like a fairly real shot. I think he's like a real NBA player based off of what I've seen.
I agree. I feel like I've kind of done the Day'Ron Sharpe love. I've talked about him to the Pelicans. I thought the Pelicans should have, as soon as Claxton signed that contract this offseason, I thought the Pelicans should have prioritized going to get a guy like Day'Ron Sharpe. I know he's not the floor spacer that we talk about for the Pelicans. I think Day'Ron Sharpe is a big time rebounder. I think he can pass. Maybe he shoots it, maybe he doesn't, but yeah, that's the guy. And then Cam Thomas, because Cam Thomas can score the basketball, but can he play the brand of basketball with a well-rounded game that really fits into a system of developing younger guys and eventually winning and all of that? But I'm definitely a Day'Ron Sharpe guy and really excited to see what he's able to do if he gets some opportunity there.
What does success look like for you for Cam Thomas this year?
So he obviously still has to score the basketball, right? Like that can't just go away. And he's got to start still by being a nuclear scorer. Like, I just want to turn on a Nets game and see him make not even high level passing reads, just like, okay, I'm double teamed. Let me find the open man, or that guy's wide open over there. I'm going to get rid of it here. And I don't just watch defensively and go, all right, well, he's just getting cooked there. The 3 points he just got, he just gave up or what. Like, just give me average or close to average in other aspects to go along with that nuclear scoring potential.
Yeah, I would like to see consistent defensive rotations. I would like to see, so his effective field goal percentage over the course of his 3 years, 90% to league average, 91% to league average, 92% to league average, right? So like 8% below league average last season, his effective field goal percentage. So to me, what is hopefully get that number closer to league average.
Sure. Yeah.
If he can get that in, maybe it's take more threes, maybe it's, who knows, right?
Maybe it's pass the ball more so you're not taking as many bad shots, right? We talk about this all the time.
Pass the ball more, totally. I would like to see an effective field goal percentage, closer to league average this year for Cam Thomas. Okay. Third team, the Boston Celtics. Your reigning NBA champions, the Boston Celtics. To me, like, they don't have a crazy number of like roster questions. It's just about the wear and tear on these guys. Like, you and I have talked about it. Jason Tatum over the last 3 years has played over 3,500 minutes in each of the last 3 years. And this summer, like, didn't get much of a break. Drew Holiday played a ton of minutes this year, didn't get much of a break. Derek White, same deal, because he went straight into Team USA again. Jaylen Brown's really the only guy that like got any sort of break here among their great players. Kristaps Porzingis is going to miss a decent portion of the season coming up here too. So for me, it's just all about like, what does the wear and tear on these players look like? And can they overcome that? Are they young enough? Are they just capable of being able to deal with that.
Yeah, that's it for me. Obviously, the expectation is win a title, right? Whenever you're the Celtics, and this is where
100%.
this is the world you've been playing in for multiple years now. The two things I said was stay healthy. Last year you got 74 from Tatum, 73 from White, 70 from Brown, 69 from Holiday, 65 from Horford. Obviously, Porzingis dealt with some injuries, including in the playoffs. And you got some age on these guys, along with everything you mentioned. The other thing I always wonder about with the title team, regardless of the sport, is do you have that chip on your shoulder? And I know some stuff has happened this offseason with the Olympic team, specifically with Tatum and Brown and all of that maybe they come in with a chip on their shoulder. But because Boston's had that, right? They almost got to the mountaintop and they quote unquote failed. And then they came back the next year and they're playing the 8-seed Heat or whatever, 7-seed, play in Heat and lose and don't get there. So sometimes that heartbreak gives you that chip, right, Sam? And that gives you that motivation. Now you went to the mountaintop and you were one of the best teams, like historically, net rating, all of that stuff, like an awesome, awesome team. Can you replicate it now? Where's the chip? Where's the motivation to go win a second one? So I think the injury stuff is absolutely a huge part of it, but the motivation, the chip on the shoulder, all of that to go and repeat, I think is something that's important as well.
Yeah. So, Jaylen Brown, 3,000 minutes last season. Drew Holiday, 3,000 minutes last season, plus the Olympics. Certainly Jason Tatum was up over 3,500 minutes last season. Derek White, I'm pulling up the numbers now as we go through it. Right around 3,000 minutes last season. So that's a lot of wear and tear on these dudes. Derek White and Drew Holiday into their 30s, not getting younger.
Horford?
How do they treat the regular season? Al Horford, obviously at 38 years old too. How do they treat the regular season as well is a big question for me. Do they try and get these guys some planned rest at times? That's a real factor. Like, can you live with playing Xavier Tillman at the big for games? Can you live with Nimi Keita and Luke Cornett at times in the front court to get Al Horford all the way through to the postseason? Can you get Baylor Shireman?
I say the wing position is what's more interesting to me. I think at the big spot with Keita and Tillman and Cornett, you're okay, right? But can Jaden Springer give you minutes? Can Shireman give you minutes? Can Lonnie Walker or Jordan Walsh or, what can any of those guys actually play for you if you wanted to rest Tatum or Holiday or White? So they have good depth in terms of like their top 8, but much like we talked about earlier with the Clippers, obviously not the same realm of teams, but do you have those younger guys that you trust to come in and give you that energy and that spark in the dog days of whatever month on a back-to-back on the road? And so that's what will be interesting to me.
Okay. Next team, the Charlotte Hornets. To me, success for the Charlotte Hornets looks like A, staying healthy, like getting LaMelo Ball and Mark Williams like through full seasons. And B, I think that they probably want to be around, 500-ish. That would be my goal. That would be my guess. Like if they take a step forward to 500, like that's a big win for them if those guys are healthy. And to do that, the thing that I kind of pointed out immediately was, can Charles Lee, stepping in as their new head coach, coming from Boston, one of the great defensive teams last season, can he do what Steve Clifford and James Borrego really couldn't do and establish like a tried and true real defensive identity? And look, like there are reasons why last year was almost impossible to do that for Steve Clifford. They got super hurt, right? But honestly, if you go back through and you read and watch some of Steve Clifford's post-game press conferences before they were injured, they're some of like the most legendarily frustrated with effort press conferences I've seen in a long time. It was not just like end of the season, middle of the season after LaMelo got hurt. Like it was like throughout the course of the season, he was quite frustrated even when they were healthy. Really, over the course of the last couple of years, The only time that they've had like what I would call like a really strong defense was probably near the end of the 2022-23 season when like they had Mark Williams and Dennis Smith Jr. and those guys were like flying around everywhere. And I think they were like top 10 in defense over the course of like the post All-Star break window. But like that wasn't really a situation you can build around looking forward into the now, where you have, you know, all these different players on the roster. So when you look at Charlotte, what are you seeing as their goal? Like, how do they exceed that expectation of, hey, a step forward for us is 500? How do we get there and kind of even go beyond that?
Yeah, so I said start winning, and I know Hornets fans would push back because a few years ago they were right at 500. So maybe I should say get back to winning, however you want to say it. And so part of that, I think the two biggest factors for me is LaMelo back to 21-22 form, which has a lot to do with injuries, and then Brandon Miller being the two-way star that I believe he can be, that we talked about. You can, I had him pretty highly ranked on our rankings and all of that. I wonder about the defense between a Brandon Miller, if he's a two-way guy, with Josh Green, with Mark Williams, can you put enough defense out there to be competent on the defensive end and then just be really good offensively with LaMelo, Miller, Miles Bridges, and those guys where you can go be 500 in the East? And I think that would be success. And I think that's how they get there. But I think it starts with LaMelo and Brandon Miller kind of being the guys that we've talked about them potentially being able to be.
I think that from an overarching organizational perspective, that is definitely right. They really need Brandon and LaMelo to be the guys. And by the way, like they had two guys ranked in our top 15, 24 and under prospects. Yeah. So like, we think they have a chance to be those guys. Like they were one of the very few teams that had that. Like Oklahoma City had that. Houston didn't have that. Right. And we love Houston's young core, but like Brandon Miller is a higher end prospect with more upside than anyone I think Houston has right now. But the last time that Charlotte had a defense that was even slightly better than league average, Bryce, do you know when that was?
Defense that was slightly better than league average. So I'm going to go, I'm assuming it wasn't 21-22. Let's go 18-19.
It was 2016-17.
Okay.
They have had, I believe, 7 consecutive years of a defense below league average. That's where this has to start for them, in my opinion. It really has to start with like Brandon Miller and Mark Williams, getting those guys to like really buy in. And Grant Williams, like, is a leader on the team who's very vocal about defense. Like they really need those guys, both as like on-court leaders who will play in the case of Miller and Mark Williams. And, Grant Williams is like a vocal leader, hopefully, to get some of the backcourt guys like LaMelo, to get Miles Bridges to consistently defend. That's where this starts for me. It has to start on the defensive end for them. Okay. We're up to the Chicago Bulls.
Change the ticker, like 60 seconds.
The Chicago Bulls. I'll ask you, what does success look like for the Bulls this year?
Pick a direction, tank.
Yeah.
Buy into the young core. So truly what I said was trade Levine and Vooch, pick a direction with that, get those guys out of there. And then my biggest thing was find the backcourt that works together. Like, what are we doing with this backcourt? Is it Kobe White and Josh Giddey playing together? Where does Dosunmu fit into that? Like, let's figure that out first. How good is this backcourt? Because you have to pay Josh Giddey at some point, right? If you trade Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey and he is not on your team, that's even worse than what we thought in the moment. Like, this cannot happen. So you got to commit to him in some capacity. Am I crazy for thinking that they have to commit to him in some capacity?
Oh, I think they're look, I wouldn't be stunned if I'm assuming this doesn't come with any internal knowledge or anything.
Yeah.
This is my assumption. I'm assuming they're going to extend Josh Giddey to like a 4-year deal or whatever. That'll be like 9 figures. So I'm assuming he's going to be a long-term piece of their backcourt. I'm assuming they think Kobe White is a long-term piece of their backcourt. So for me, like when I was defining success for them, I thought it was, okay, we find a direction. I think that even for them organizationally, given, all of the reporting, it's probably find a new home for Zach LaVine in general, like hopefully bring some value for Zach LaVine. Maybe he plays really well at the start of the season and a team gets desperate and they're like, okay, Zach LaVine is something that can help us. And I agree with you. It's figure out like what the backcourt is of the future. You've paid Patrick Williams. You've, obviously you have Modest Buzelis, who you're hoping is going to be something. The question for me is like Kobe White is coming near the end of now this very cheap extension.
Yeah. Yep.
Is 2 years left at like 22 million. Josh Giddey is, almost a guy that if they extend him, they are then more committed to than Kobe White. So if Kobe White for 1 year after this year, they might have Josh Giddey for 4 years after this year, right? So it could be 5. Like they could extend him super long term. Who knows? I would assume Mu is a guy that like will need to be like paid like more substantially at some point.
2 for 14. He's got 2 years left at $7 million each.
So, and I think you and I really think Dosunmu is quite good.
I think he had a really good year last year, if nothing else. He was very good last year.
Like really good as a driver of play in transition, can defend a little bit. The jumper has improved. I think that he's going to be like a pretty useful rotation player. And like, there's a chance he's a starter to me long term. I think that the Bulls really need to figure out what does that backcourt mix look like. It might be a little bit hard to do that with LaVine, frankly.
Yep.
What do you think they expect in terms of win losses? Not what we expect. Like, I think you and I expect that this team's going to be quite poor. That this team has like no chance to defend anybody and that they're probably going to end up winning under 30 games. But what do you think that they think that? Because I don't know that they do.
You can talk yourself into more than that, right? I want to be very clear. I don't think you should do this, but if you talk yourself into Zach LaVine being healthy with, let's just say let's say you think this, we're going to put the ball in Josh Giddey's hands, which both of you think he's a very good regular season player if that's what he gets to do. With Zach LaVine playing off of him, you have Patrick Williams. If they think that Vooch, and then you have the backcourt or the backup backcourt of Dosunmu and Kobe White now. You have a theoretic floor spacing big in Jalen Smith. Maybe you think Buzelis comes in. Like you can talk yourself into being a 500 basketball team. I would not try to do that, but I think they could talk themselves into that.
Yeah. If I'm them, I'm thinking, shit, we can get Cooper Flag. Let's go tank. Like, this is great. But I'm so confused on what they think I would bet you that they think they're a playing team.
Yeah.
This year.
You can
and look, they might be.
It. Yeah.
But, I look at Atlanta, I would have them ahead. I would have Boston certainly ahead. I would have Cleveland ahead. I would have Indiana, Miami, Milwaukee, New York, Orlando, Philly ahead for sure. I think that, Toronto, I would have them ahead too, if I'm being completely honest. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the Bulls. I don't know what they're thinking about their situation.
Nobody does.
Okay. The Cleveland Cavaliers. To me, success for the Cavs is, okay, they lost in the first round in 2022-23 to the New York Knicks. Great. They came back. They added Max Strus. They won, 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. They won a first round series. They got to the second round, lost in the second round. To me, success for them looks like continued growth with this core where you have Donovan Mitchell, who's a top 15 player in the league. Success for them is probably going to the conference finals. Like they're not going to be like disappointed if they go to the second round or anything, but conference finals is probably their barometer this year.
It has to be. You fired your coach who just took you to the second round. So if you don't expect to be better than that, why did you fire your coach? I guess unless you think you got there in spite of him. So I have the same thing, Sam. I have Eastern Conference Finals.
their roster hasn't really changed. So where does that expectation and like how do you exceed that if you are them? Does it really just come from the kids like
No,
Garland and Mobley getting better?
I think it comes from Kenny Atkinson and staff figuring out the roster that you brought back, and I don't think fully committed to. We talked about the Jarrett Allen contract and how it's very tradable and all that. So you either stagger those guys, you trade one of those guys, or this is where Atkinson comes into play. You get creative offensively to make those guys work, with part of that being the linchpin is Evan Mobley, in my opinion. Evan Mobley really figures out the offense and spaces the floor or whatever, where you can really now that stuff works a little bit more with him and Jarrett Allen. I think that's where it's at. But yeah, Eastern Conference Final, and then this core meshes either with another year, a new coach, or some sort of growth specifically from Evan Mobley. Also, injuries were a real thing last year for this team.
Yeah.
When we talked about Darius Garland, you brought up the jaw, it was jaw, something, right? Or he had his jaw wired shut anyway. Mitchell played 55, Garland 57, Mobley 50. Jarrett Allen was the only guy that played 70 plus, more than 60 plus of the big four. So health could be on their side a little bit more this year as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's really about like staying healthy and hopefully getting better offensive structure and scheme from Kenny Atkinson. And to me, the ability to have better structure and offensive scheme is probably going to come down to Evan Mobley kind of taking that next jump, right? That's what's going to matter here. Like they need Evan Mobley to be able to actually play the four. With Jarrett Allen's deal, like Jarrett Allen is like a tradable player for sure, especially near the end of the year. I believe he didn't sign his extension after the deadline, right?
I don't think so.
I think it was before, which means that Evan, is either going to have to be a 4-man or they're going to have to move Jarrett Allen. That's kind of what it comes down to. Or you're going to have to move Evan Mobley, which I don't think they want to do given the amount of money that they decided to give him. So to me, when I look at the Cavs, it's going to come down to Kenny Atkinson getting the most out of their offense and Evan Mobley also getting better as a perimeter player, as a shooter, as a scorer, as a overall offensive playmaker. And
as we sit right here, we do have a contract situation going on with a guy that started 42 games for them last year. And, largely because of those injuries, but what ends up happening, what happens with Isaac Okoro? I'm not saying he's the most important piece of the puzzle here, but I think it'd be nice to have that guy figured out whatever's like, they have a lot of roster spots left, as we've talked about. So,
yeah, I think that's right. We're going to see what they're going to do. Like, I'm imagining they're going to kind of bring guys to training camp and see what that looks like. And like you said, Okoro's situation is still unresolved. That was a key part of their defense last year at the very least. Yeah, I'm just kind of assuming that this team will be healthier next year and probably wins more regular season games next year. It's just that is this core, creative enough and good enough in the playoffs offensively to really kind of thrive and make that work.
And I don't think either of us would pick them over at least 3 teams, if not 4 in the Eastern Conference. We're not picking them over Boston in the playoffs, a healthy Philly, New York, and probably not even Milwaukee.
No.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so. And honestly, like, yeah, Philly, Milwaukee,
and I didn't mention
Miami would be interesting.
I didn't mention Indiana or Orlando.
Yeah. Miami would be really, really interesting.
Yep.
Okay. Next up, your beautiful, lovely Detroit Pistons, Bryce.
Can we get some wins, man?
I will ask you because this is your realm. What is a successful season for the Detroit Pistons?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of people would say just go ahead and tank again for Cooper Flag, which I get. I said 25 wins to 30. Like, you go get some real wins. And I think a lot of that comes down to the floor spacing is real. that they theoretically acquired this summer. The numbers would back that up, that it's more than theoretical, and that guys like Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey look like what a lot of us thought they would look like when they have that floor spacing. And so I think that's success this year is Cade looks like a real dude. Jaden Ivey looks like a top 5 pick. You can even say it about Asar and whatever. I think it's really those two guys because they finally have real floor spacing to operate offensively.
Yeah, so it's two-way play to me, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Can Jalen Duren defend anybody? Like that's a real question to me. Like, can he become a solid drop coverage defender? Can Jaden Ivey become like a solid overall two-way defensive player? Can Asar Thompson learn how to offense? And on top of it, how do you mix in the vets with all of this group, right? So like you have Tobias Harris that you're adding into this group. You have certainly
Tim Hardaway Jr.,
Tim Hardaway Jr., who's going to play some minutes.
Brought
it's just going to be
back.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see who can actually how do they blend the minutes between the vets and the younger guys?
Yes.
And B, how do those younger guys continue to grow? To me, like I want to see defensive growth. I guess would be the number one place. Like JB Bickerstaff is your new coach, right? JB Bickerstaff's coming from a place in Cleveland where there has been a lot of really, really good, solid defensive play. Can he get the most out of Jalen Duren from having taught Jared Allen for all those years? Can he get what he needs to out of all of those players?
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, that was my second bullet point, was even a small step in individual defense. I kind of just wondered if that was going to take more than one offseason in 1 year for JB to really show his imprint, but it would be awesome. I think saying two-way was interesting, right? Because even Cade, even as much as I like Cade, I think there needs to be a step for him on the defensive end as well. But that two-way thing then really applies to an Asar Thompson and the offensive end. For Isaiah Stewart, who I think is a pretty interesting third big on the defensive end, can the floor spacing be real? I think people would be surprised if they went and looked up Isaiah Stewart's 3-point percentage last season, even in the amount of games he played. I don't think people realize what he shot, but you know, can that continue? Can he do anything off the bounce? Because if he does that, he becomes a really interesting big for a team and this team, or if they wanted to trade him for whatever reason. So I think what you said about we're going to do a lineups episode. It's kind of a every year thing on the Pistons Pulse podcast. And that's going to be the most fun one I've done since I've podcasted about the team, because of this mix of vets who legitimately should be on a floor for the Pistons anyway, and these young guys and the floor spacing and the non-floor spacing and all of that, just the way that they intertwine that. You know, JB and the staff has their work cut out trying to figure out those rotations.
So my question for you is just going to be simple. Who is their starting lineup? Because I'm glad you said lineup. Like, what do you think that their lineup looks like?
Cade, Ivey, Tech, Harris, Duren. And here's why.
Cade, Ivey, Tech, Harris, Duren. Okay, so you're not starting Asar. You're not starting Hardaway. You're not starting Stewart. Okay. I think that's the lineup I would want. But yeah.
So here's why. I think they need to, more than anybody, they need to find out who Jaden Ivey and Jalen Duren are. And that people are going to be really mad at me and not starting Asar. I don't think you should play very minutes of Asar and Duren together. And they need to find out about Duren sooner than they need to find out about Sar, because Duren and Ivey are already coming up on offseason of rookie extension talk. So I think you want to know more so with, and Asar ended last season with blood clots. I assume he's healthy, but like, I'm not sure where he's going to be coming into the season as well. So that's what I would do.
So here'd be my two questions here, and we're about to run out on time because of course we are with the Pistons. That leaves Ron Holland and Asar Thompson together, potentially playing minutes. If that's the case, I would want to put probably Ron in the G League to start next year.
Sure.
Again, and like kind of let him continue to grow and mature and figure out his game in the G League then. That's a lot of kind of non-shooters to me in the backcourt or in the kind of all over the map here. We've got like these dudes like in the chat going absolutely crazy, and I'm like trying to ban them, and it's just losing my mind here. To me, it's just can you figure out lineups that work across the board that make it kind of even for the bench units and the starters and everything? There's still a lot of non-shooters on this team, and that's going to be really complicated.
And for what I have been adamant about staggering Jaden Ivey as well. I want to see him and Cade play together, but I would stagger him out very quickly for one of Hardaway Jr. Beasley. And then you have a floor spacing big in Stewart with Ivey kind of controlling the ball in the second unit with one of Beasley or Hardaway Jr. still in the second unit. And that can make up for some of the lack of floor spacing from a Holland and or a Sarr.
Okay. Indiana Pacers. So they made the conference finals last year. They were the 6th seed. I think to me, it's just basically you got to kind of like go to the second round again and like win a round of the playoffs again. Because look, they got like a little bit lucky. The Knicks got super injured last year, right? But they have this group of Tyrese Halliburton, who is ready. You've got Miles Turner, who's a free agent entering, serious, I'm about to get paid off season. You've got Pascal Siakam, who is entering this incredible, really, really solid prime where he's like a borderline all NBA player. They're ready to win now. Can you actually do it? At the level you did last year, getting to the conference finals? I think they can. I think this is clearly like a top 6 seed in the East. It's just that the league right now is so deep by and large that, the East is getting better. We look at the West, like the West is still a bloodbath, but the East still has Milwaukee. New York is going to be better. Orlando is getting better. Philadelphia is probably going to be better with Paul George this year. Cleveland is probably going to be healthier than what it was this year. That top end of the East is quite difficult.
Yep. So I don't take a step back. I don't think that means they have to make the Eastern Conference Finals, but I think a step back to me would be losing in the first round or, not even having the regular season they had where they ended up the 6th seed, right? And they were tied with Philly at 47-35. What if you only win 43 games and you end up in the play-in or, and then you end up as the 8th seed and have to take on Boston in the first round? Like, to me, that would be the step back I would not want to see from them. So I think to not let that happen, Tyrese Halliburton has to be healthy. We've talked about it. I kind of even admitted it whenever I, took Maxey before him the other day, where maybe I'm seeing that Tyrese Halliburton and forgetting the first part of the year Tyrese Halliburton. So he's got to be healthy. The other thing is, can you be the defense you were post All-Star break, where you were 18th in defensive rating after the All-Star break? Can you be 20th or something like that all season long? Because that, to go along with your offense, is going to lead to, hitting these expectations, in my opinion.
So I agree with you on the defensive side of the court. The question for me is, do you think that the defense can actually like genuinely improve with Halliburton being there and with like the personnel that they have with Nembhard and with Ben Mathurin probably playing more minutes, and Mathurin hasn't been like a particularly great defender? I think that with Siakam and Turner that you have a chance to do that. It just is quite tricky to try and navigate those things.
Yeah, I mean, they're never expecting them to be a top half of the league on defense. I think it would be crazy. But I think with Siakam, with Turner, as you mentioned, Nembhard, we talked about McConnell, like giving crazy effort, Nesmith. Like, I think you have enough guys with the potential that just with that effort and the focus on it, you can be, like I say, 20th all year long. Like, that's all. Again, that's all I'm asking is don't be bottom 5 for the entire year. Just be what you were post All-Star break.
I think that that's probably best case scenario for them, to be honest with you, unless Turner like has the season of his career.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. If Miles Turner has the season of his career, then like that's a totally different ball game, and then they're gonna have to pay him, and that kind of throws some things into the spanner, but like whatever, right? it does probably come down to defense. To me, I guess like 50 wins is probably what they're aiming for. They won 47 last year. 50 would be a jump, and then hopefully make the second round, right?
Yep.
That I think like continues the momentum for them, right?
Yep. Yeah. Continue you got to keep that momentum going.
Okay. The Miami Heat. I said conference finals for the Miami Heat.
Okay.
Is that aggressive?
No, so I said one more quote unquote Heat season, which is essentially what I meant. Like you go, can they have another, not great regular season? They're the 7 seed. They win, maybe they lose the first play in with, I guess you don't want to end up as the 8 seed, but like they make this run that nobody sees coming because Jimmy does Jimmy things in the playoffs. Bam is a beast. And then, Khalil Ware is, first team all rookie and plays at that level for him or something like that. Like the unknown Heat player that they seem to find. Like, can they do that again with Jimmy still there?
So here's the thing. When I say conference finals, this is a aging-ish team, right? Duncan Robinson is 30. Terry Rozier is 30. Jimmy Butler is 35 and potentially in the last year of his contract. Bam Adebayo is like firmly in his prime at 27. Tyler Hero's firmly in his prime at 20. This is his 25-year-old season forthcoming. Haywood Highsmith is 28 years old. Kevin Love is 36. Josh Richardson is 31. For you to have a team that is this old, you're trying to contend. Like that's kind of the reality of where the Miami Heat are. They are trying to contend for an NBA title, regardless of whether or not Bryce or I think that they can do it. And this team, like I get that they have reason to believe that they can. Jimmy Butler in the playoffs has been undeniable over the course of the last 5 years, but it is difficult for me to actually think that they have a chance to do that in this Eastern Conference as well. And I get that like they have a lot of younger guys that they should be excited about. Khalil Ware, Jaime Jaquez, Nikola Jovic. Like they have 3 guys there that look like long-term players for the Miami Heat that will be useful. But like Jimmy Butler needs to be himself for 65 games, right? They need him in order to actually get to a reasonable seed where they don't have to play Boston in the first round and they have to play New York in the second round and then Milwaukee in the conference finals, right? They need those guys to actually be who they can be for long periods of time in the regular season. Otherwise, I think it's going to be really, really hard for them.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know that I believe this is going to happen, but if we're talking about what they should be expecting or what they are expecting, again, it's that Heaty type of season that we've seen before, and it's led by Jimmy just kind of maybe being slept on and a little underappreciated and then going crazy when he needs to and getting some of those heroics, especially in the playoffs, from guys that we weren't expecting to see it from.
What is their ceiling in the regular season? So like they won 53 games in 2021-22, right? But other than that, they haven't won more than 50 games, I believe, since the like LeBron James, Dwayne Wade era, right? Like they've won 50-win season in the last essentially decade.
13, 14, yeah.
Can they actually win 50 games? Like, is that doesn't feel like a reasonable expectation to me.
I don't think, that would not be my expectation for this team. No.
So if that's the case, then we're probably looking at a team, given what we think of, Cleveland, Indiana, Orlando, we think is going to take a leap this year. Obviously Boston, Milwaukee, New York. They probably are looking like at best at the 5-6, right? So you're probably not looking at home court. To do that, they probably need Jimmy to play 65 to 70 games. And like, he hasn't done that in a long time.
Yeah. The last time he played more than 65 was 16-17.
Yeah. So maybe he will. Like, this is a contract year for Jimmy. Like, if he comes up and like really steps out and like plays incredibly well, maybe he could get like another 2-year like crazy deal. But I don't know. It feels tricky to try and determine where the Heat are. If they're going to exceed, it's going to be Khalil Ware plays super well, Hawkes takes a leap, Jovic takes another leap, and Jimmy Butler plays like 70 games. That's really the number one thing to me.
Just to clarify, he does have a player option next year.
He does. Like, he's locked in for at least 52 million next year.
Yeah.
But like, if I'm him, I'm thinking that I can go and get, an actual deal.
Yeah, for sure. No, I just wanted to make sure. So
yeah, no, I get it. Okay. Next up, the Milwaukee Bucks. This is just all about like how they play with Doc, right?
Yeah.
Like, if they're going to exceed expectations, it's going to be because like Doc Rivers has brought them something like new and different, I guess. And like, they figure out how to make the Giannis Dame 2-man game work at an even higher level. Like, Chris Middleton is coming off of another offseason surgery. Brooke Lopez is in a free agency year again. So you would think that he'll probably come out and try and get paid. This depth, like, it's better because they were able to go out and get Taurean Prince and Gary Trent and DeLon Wright, but like, none of the kids have really stepped up in the way that they were hoping. So it kind of does come down to, can Doc make these players kind of all work together in the way that we hope that they can?
What's crazy is they had decent health last year outside of Middleton. Portis played 82, Lopez 79, Beasley 79, Connaughton 76, Dame 73, and Giannis 73. So they did have decent health last year. I would say chemistry. So my expectation or there should be Eastern Conference Finals. That's what I put for them. Chemistry, and then
that's too low.
You think it has to be a championship?
I think it has to be finals.
Okay.
You have Dame and Giannis.
Yeah.
Like, you have one of the 5 best players in the world, like, very real case that Giannis is the best player in the world. I will listen to that argument. And you have Damian Lillard, who's a top 15 player in the league. Like, your expectation is title at that point.
I just
you should be going at least to the finals, probably, if you have a successful season in that regard.
Last 3 seasons, lost in conference semifinals, lost in first round. Now, I will say, Giannis's injuries have been a part of that. So that's fair. Maybe I set my expectations too low. I put you win the vet minimum offseason. Like we saw it last year where Derrick Jones Jr. is starting on a finals team. Can you win the vet min offseason with DeLon Wright, Taurean Prince, and Gary Trent Jr.? Because I just don't think Doc's going to play any of these young guys. So I think it's those. Obviously, Giannis and Dame and Middleton's health, all of that. But can you get real contributions from a couple of those guys? I mean, I assume Gary Trent Jr. is starting for this team, right?
Yeah.
At the 2. And, DeLon Wright is the 3rd guard. So, yeah, I think that would be a huge part of it if you win with those moves on the margin.
I think that is how they exceed expectations, is Gary Trent like being unbelievable and Taurean Prince being kind of what he was for the Lakers last year. It's just the Lakers needed him to be a little bit more than that, right? Like, the Bucks won't need Taurean Prince to be more than that. They just need him to be floor spacer who comes in, hits 38% from 3, right? They are like title or bust to me, though. The construction of this team,
that's fair. Yeah.
Is that Chris Middleton comes back and is able to be like that secondary bench creator who starts and like spaces the court for Giannis and Dame and can be that primary, like the secondary creator at the 2 guard spot. Like, it's hard. Like, they're trying to win a title to me. What do we think of the Giannis Dame combination right now?
Like, I just wish I would see more pick and roll with them, because I think it should work. I think it'd even be fun to invert it a little bit, like be creative with it, where actually you have Dame come and set like a pop or ghost and pop or something like that, which then gets Giannis a chance to get downhill, or you have a really good shooter, obviously, in Dame. So,
and you have a floor spacing 5, so you have the ability to go get creative in those ways, right?
Because you can
Like,
put your 5 in the corner, which a lot of teams can't do and keep proper floor spacing. So
correct.
I'm intrigued to see, right? Like the fact that it maybe wasn't what we all wanted to see last year. It was year one of it. Maybe they figured out this offseason. Obviously, the coaching stuff was kind of crazy. You hire a new coach and then you fire him and bring in another one, pretty early into the season for that type of scenario. So I think there's a world where they come back and it's the duo we all thought it was going to be when the move happened.
Shout out to Brian Garces for the super chat over on YouTube. Did the Bucks kids get a chance to show off in any way last year? No, but like I kind of think that they didn't earn it either. Like if you saw those kids at Summer League, I mean, they didn't look ready to be in a rotation for a contending team. Like AJ Green didn't play Summer League, but like AJ Green's probably the one that looks closest to being able to play.
Yeah, like I was not a fan of Marjan at Summer League. I love Andre, but like until he can really knock down shots, like is Livingston the one that
I think
like,
it's probably Andre is the most likely, but
okay.
Yeah, like Livingston, looked okay at Summer League at least.
And neither of us thought Tyler Smith was going to come in. I know we're talking about guys that got drafted this year now, but
Tyler and AJ, like they're not going to be ready to go this year.
Yeah, exactly. And we said that when they got drafted. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't see it.
I don't see it either. So look, they need to win. I think that you said it right. How they exceed expectations is like if they won the vet minimum offseason.
Yep.
Okay. Next up, the New York Knicks. I said that their expectation should probably be NBA Finals. I mean, like I'll accept conference finals. Like if they went from second round to conference finals this year, I think everyone in New York would probably be pretty happy. But like if I'm that team and I have the team that they have assembled, if I'm one of those players, I'm thinking, okay, we can do this. We can be on a finals team this year. So the big question for me in terms of if they can exceed that, A, Jalen Brunson has to be Brunson again. Yep. But B, it comes down to the front court for me. Like I'm a big believer in the Anunoby, Mikal Bridges combination. They have Josh Hart coming off the bench. They have Dante DiVincenzo, who's been like incredible last season for New York. And I completely buy into him being a really, really impactful player. Do they play Julius Randle at the 5 ever? Is that a look that Tibbs is willing to go to? Can Mitchell Robinson stay healthy? If they aren't willing to go to Julius Randle at the 5, can Jericho Sims, Precious, Ariel Hookporty, whoever, be able to like provide the kind of size and depth that they need at the 5? Or is this a circumstance where it's going to be an issue for them, given the way that Tibbs likes to play and likes to have that 5 position play? It does come down to the front court for me and how that looks. Because I think the rest of the team, especially if Brunson is going to be what he was last year again, and I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be, I would say that they are well positioned to be a high-level playoff team.
So lockstep on this one. I said Eastern Conference Finals or Finals. And then my 2 things was the center position works itself out. I mean, if they would have been able to keep Hartenstein, like forget it. Like I would be super excited about this team. And then I put Brunson replicates. Here's my question to you. Do you think they want to win the Eastern Conference in the regular season? And do you think that they're able to do it? Like what are their chances of doing it?
I think they want to, yes. Because holy shit, did you see the Garden last playoffs? Like if I'm them, I want to win the regular season. And Tibbs has always been like a kind of guy that wants to win every game, right? Like if I'm them, I want the number 1 seed. I want to make people come into the Garden and beat us. That to me is like a huge, huge advantage for them. Like that fan base is out of their minds and I love them. Like I love Knicks fans. That arena, there's just nothing like it, really. So yes, to answer your question, I want to be the 1 seed. And I do think that's like a pretty reasonable goal for them. Chance. It does come down to like how hard Boston tries. Boston Agreed. Is still to me the most talented team in the East, like by a good amount. But for all of the reasons we talked about when we talked about Boston, do they try to take their foot off the pedal in order to kind of preserve the minutes on these guys with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Drew Holiday and Derek White, like 3 of those 4 guys playing Team USA and everything? I think the number 1 seed is in the realm for the Knicks. Like, it's not out of the question.
If I felt better about their center position, that would be something I would feel, I don't want to say good about, but something I wouldn't feel awful making that take that New York, I wouldn't pick them in the playoffs, but to pick them to win the 1 seed in the regular season, just because the Philly's only playing for the playoffs, especially with those 2 guys. Boston may, especially with Porzingis not being there for a while in the summer those guys had. I just can't get there because I'm so worried. Maybe I'm overly worried. I'm just so worried about the Knicks center position because I thought it was so vital to their success last year.
Here's my final thing on the Knicks in terms of how they exceed expectations. They probably need one more of these guys to step up and be like a true secondary creator. The guy that it makes sense to be is Randall.
I was gonna say Julius, right? Like that Julius.
Yeah, but like Randall didn't play on like in the playoffs, right?
Yeah.
Like, so.
But he can do that if he's healthy, don't you think?
He can totally do that, like 100%.
Okay.
But just adding Julius back in with Mitch Robb, if Mitch is healthy, create like kind of a cramped court for Jalen Brunson in playoff settings, right?
Yeah.
If I was them, I would love it if Mikal Bridges could be like the 20 point per game Mikal Bridges that we saw in Brooklyn, while also adding like the sick defense that we saw. And I don't know if he can do that because like I thought Mikal kind of dropped off a little bit defensively in Brooklyn, you know, potentially from being the number 1 option and having to expend more energy on that side of the court. Now, like, they don't need Mikal to do as much on offense or on defense because they have OG Anunoby, right?
Yeah.
So like, can you blend those 2 factors where he can be like a real significant plus on defense and a significant plus on offense? That would be my like hope for what a Mikal Bridges looks like in New York. Like, I would like to see not the pure offense that we saw in Brooklyn. It wasn't pure offense, but it was a lot more geared toward that. But he probably doesn't also need to be like the all-world defender we saw in Phoenix either. He can be like a great defender as opposed to a solid defender like we saw in Brooklyn.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Next up is Orlando, the Orlando Magic. To me, like, this is still one of the youngest teams in the league. If they get to the second round, everybody's happy.
Same.
Right?
Yep.
If they win 48 games and get to the second round, everybody's going to be like, this is still one of the great teams that looks like it's building toward becoming a long-term contender in the East. And the way that they would exceed that is if the KCP addition is just like massive for them and completely changes their court spacing and allows Jalen Suggs and Paulo, frankly, to grow into being like the lead point guards of the team.
So I put second round of playoffs as well. I put continued growth from Paulo and Franz. You know, with Paulo, we talked about efficiency, you know, continuing to get better defensively. I think with Franz, it's can the 3-point shooting get back to his rookie season and not what we've seen the last 12 months. And then I went a little bit more than KCP. I just said the backcourt spaces and defends. And when I say the backcourt, obviously the addition of KCP, but can Jalen Suggs replicate something close to what he did from the 3-point line last year? Can he be an all NBA defender? And then also I'm going to throw in Anthony Black into that as well, in terms of, I think he can defend. Can he space the floor at an NBA level enough to be on the court and provide the spacing, you know, for, you know, off the bench? So those were the 2 things for me. If they hit this, it's because Paulo and Franz continue to grow. And then they just had this really, and I'm not purposely leaving out Cole Anthony, but we know Cole Anthony's not going to be like this high level defender.
Awesome backup point guard.
Yeah. I'm not like diminishing what he brings, but then you have these guards who really defend the perimeter, but also are able to space the floor to give that spacing to Paulo to operate, to Franz to operate.
So the thing you and I didn't talk a ton about when we did Jalen Suggs on the 24, under 24 and 24 list what if getting KCP allows Jalen Suggs to expend more energy on offense as opposed to like defense,
Sure.
and then leads to another offensive leap? Like, to me, it's not like an energy thing for Suggs on offense. Might be like a mental energy thing, to be honest, where like, he plays slow and, is able in half court settings to take ball screens, continue to work on his feet. I think his feet kind of let him down at times in ball screens with his footwork. I think he can get out over like unbalanced a little bit at times, but continue to work on that, continue to work on, being more of an offensive threat than just playing off of Paulo, slashing, being a consistent weapon in ball screens, I think is the key for Jalen Suggs continuing to grow and mature as an overall player. Now, like maybe KCP unlocks that because KCP can take on all of the tough assignments on the perimeter, and Suggs can expend more energy. I don't know, right?
I'd be interested to see it, to see if that higher usage and number of field goal attempts and all of that allows him to be as efficient as he was last year, where he was 47, 40, 76. So, give him that usage to see his creation ability, and can he get to his spots and knock down shots at a high rate? I would love to see it. I think they're still in a situation where they can, I don't want to call that an experiment, but you can still try to find out things and find the ceiling of your player. You don't want to just lock them into a box because you're trying to win at such a high priority that you don't even really see what these guys are able to do. So I would love to see that from Suggs, just to find out and know moving forward whether he has that in his game or not.
The last thing here is just like, look, I feel like we know what Franz is going to be. Franz is going to get better. Like, I don't mean to like put a ceiling on Franz. Like, I think Franz is going to be a, 5-time All-Star at some point. Like, I think that much of him. I think the world of him. But Paulo continuing to grow and become even more of like the primary creator. Like, we all thought Anthony Edwards was going to be great this year, but Anthony Edwards took another leap in being like the guy who can run the show on offense for Minnesota. If Paulo can take the same leap that Ant took from year 2 to year 3, they're a 50-win team like pretty easily, and they're like a really, really awesome basketball team.
Okay. Yep, I agree.
So that would be my, like, if they're going to exceed expectations, that's how it happens. Probably is we see a better Jalen Suggs, and we see Paulo take that jump from, what Ant was as a second-year player to what he was as a third-year player. Okay. The 76ers now. I mean, this is just all about like how quickly do these guys mesh to me? How quickly does Tyrese Maxey, Paul George, and Joel Embiid come together? Like, is it ready to go from the jump? Which, like, these things rarely are, but I will say if you were trying to build a trio of guys that could come together from the jump, it would probably be, this group. Like, it look very similar to this trio, right? Like a great wing who can play on and off the ball, a great guard who can play on and off the ball, and a big and Joel Embiid who can play defense at a high level and who can also create his own shot and be like an MVP caliber player, right?
So positionally, it makes sense, right? And we talk all the time about like operating in the same space. I don't think these guys have to operate in the same space. And so now there is like the way Joel plays and all of that offensively. And then now, when we're playing a 2-man game with him and Maxey, is PG okay just spacing, and how does that work? So health is obviously one, especially in the playoffs. I think we've talked about this recently. Are you going to get playoff Maxey? What we've seen from Tyrese Maxey in the playoffs multiple years. I mean, he was unreal this last year, but even before that, he was very good. And then I will also, similar to the Bucks, did they truly win on the margins, Sam? Did they really build out this roster? I like what they did. You get Caleb Martin, you bring back Oubre, Andre Drummond, Eric Gordon, Reggie Jackson, Kyle Lowry, Yabusele. Did you win on the margins with those guys? Because even if those three click, you still have to round out this roster with all of those other players. So did they get the right guys in that can help them win, especially in the playoffs?
The thing we talked about with Maxey was like, we might have fucked up putting him like at 7 or 8 or wherever we had him on the 24 under 24.
Yeah.
Maxey might just be like a real dude. That's the thing that I keep coming back to. They might have 3 top 15 guys in the league next year. Paul George was incredible last year. Like, that's the thing that I'm not sure enough people realized. Paul George was still like amazing at basketball last year. Teams like when the Clippers played Paul George and Kawhi Leonard on the court, they still beat the shit out of teams. Like, they won those minutes by like 10 plus per 100 possessions. Paul George is awesome. And if Maxey is like better than James Harden, which I think he is now, they really might win these minutes by like crazy numbers. I agree with you. Like, I kind of liked what I saw from Oubre on defense last year. I think he got better than what it had been earlier in his career. I thought that he showed like fight and willingness to get over screens.
He made some plays too, right? Like, even if he did some boneheaded things, he would be like, he would go and block a shot or get a deflection or something like that.
And then for the Sixers, what this, like, the only thing that matters for the Sixers in terms of them winning a title, right, is if Joel Embiid can get through the whole season.
Yep.
Getting Paul George and Tyrese Maxey, if those two guys are top 15 players, you might be able to play him fewer than 60 games. Now, Joel might not want to play 60 games, like with the incentives that come with the player participation policy and things like that. But like, and like, obviously, like if he's healthy, he has to play, given the player participation policy. But I think that if they can get Joel more active rest minutes where he's not like solely responsible, or if they can have him play 20 minutes a game here and there throughout the course of the season, it's really going to be additive to getting him through the full season healthy, which ultimately is the biggest difference for them if they can win the title or not, is if Joel can get to the playoffs at 100%. We haven't really seen it yet. I don't know if we've seen Joel like play a season where he hasn't looked like slightly worn down in the fourth quarter. Maybe the MVP season, right? But even last season, I thought like in the fourth quarter, he looked like a little bit more worn down than what you would like to see at times, right? To me, I think that they need to work as hard as they can on getting Joel through the season fully healthy.
And because we say it about other players, we have to note that he went and played the Olympics this offseason as well, which, you know, how does that affect him coming into the year? Yeah.
It's really interesting to see what they can do. And look, like all the fit guys, you're right. Like, can Caleb Martin and Kelly Oubre be like the defensive guys around this trio to let them, you know, really make offense happen? Paul George is still like a really good defender, so he can take on some of those tough assignments as well. But if I'm the 76ers, the expectation is I am competing for a title this year, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The Toronto Raptors. I struggled with what their expectation is.
I did too.
I think they want to make the playoffs because that's always what Toronto wants to do. They have this weird group of players with like Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley that are, you know, early career veterans, let's call them, right? You know, 4th year, 5th year in Quickley's case. Jay Barrett in his 6th year, if I remember correctly. But like all very young. Like they've these guys that are, you know, 24, 25, in Scotty's case, 23. But then they have Bruce Brown and they have Jakob Poeltl and they have like some veterans like Kelly Oubre, right?
Kelly Olynyk.
Or Kelly Olynyk, I'm sorry. I think that if things go right for them, like they want to try and make the playoffs. Now they're flexible enough with the contracts, like with Olynyk and with Bruce Brown, where if it doesn't go that way, like they can move around and like try to regroup this core around Barnes and Quickley particularly. And then obviously like, you know, Grady Dick is still on this roster. He had a pretty solid close to the regular season, and you know, they have all these, you know, interesting draft picks like forthcoming as well between Mobo and et cetera, that they can get, right? But to me, I feel like they want to try and win 40 games, probably is what they're trying to do. How do they do that? What do you think how did they exceed their expectation with this core?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. They want to go win those type of games. I think play-in is probably, if I'm a Raptors fan and you're not thinking tank, obviously, then I think if you get to the play-in, that would exceed expectations. That would be a good year. I think missing the play-in would be disappointing for them. And to me, it means Scotty is the guy, and you kind of find the right guys to roll with him and run with him. You mentioned all the, are him and IQ a really good pair? How does RJ fit into that? Is Grady Dick able to fit into it because he spaces the floor? Is Jakob Poeltl the guy that makes sense, or somebody like, even if it's not Kelly Olynyk long term, do you find out that, hey, this kind of floor spacing big man is actually what fits best in this situation, as opposed to a Jakob Poeltl or somebody like that? So to me, it's winning games while Scotty is your guy, and you're finding out the pieces that make the most sense around him.
I think, yeah, that's generally like the overarching thing in terms of like getting into the nitty gritty on how that happens. It's probably that like Emmanuel Quickley is I don't know, 20 point per game, 6 assists per game guy, right? That improves the finishing on the interior and obviously has that sick little floater game, but like, instead of shooting 43, 42% from the field, it's like 46, 47% from the field. In RJ's case, like it's exactly what he did at the end of the season, right?
Yeah.
Like if he can continue being what he was for Canada and the Olympics and what he was at the end of the season for Toronto, they probably are a 40-win team, to be honest with you. Bruce Brown, like what do you do with him? Do you keep him? Like, do you use him as a trade chip, right? Like trying to figure out their direction is hard because like I would imagine early on they're going to try and like see if the kids can float and win. But then they could also be a team that like late in the season, if they are, I don't know, let's say 25-28 or something like that, which isn't impossible. And that would be like everything that we just talked about in terms of Quickley, Barnes, and Barrett, like could work out and they could still be 25-28.
Yeah.
With the way that, the NBA is right now in terms of depth league wide. I feel like if that's the case, I wonder if they do look to move parts and like get another dude like a Cooper Flag, like a Dylan Harper or whatever.
Yeah, I would be fine with this. So you're doing the Utah from the last couple of years, right? Where you win some games and all that. Then I would be okay with that just as long as through those 53 games, you figured out the winning to me. And maybe Toronto already knows this. Maybe I'm the one that doesn't know this, but like, what is the winning recipe around Scotty and IQ and even RJ? Like what do we need to put around them and figure that out? I think that would be a win to know that Scotty's the guy and we know the blueprint to really build this thing out and start to make a run, 2-3 years from now.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's what you're trying to do if you're Toronto. Basically is figure out who the guys are long-term and how they fit around Scotty more than anything. And how RJ like fits with Scotty to me. Because if he plays the way he did last year, obviously it really works. If the shot is a little bit less effective than it was throughout the course of last year when he got to Toronto, things get a little bit more questionable in terms of how you have to build around those two if you're trying to build around those two and quickly. Okay, final team. The Washington Wizards. Look, I don't think anybody in Washington cares about wins and losses next season. The rebuild is just continuing there. It's just like, can Sar, Bilal, or Bub Carrington be on like a 25 under 25 and 25 list for us, right? Can any of those three be real, like substantial dudes moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same tank, whatever you want to call it, and prioritize Star, Bub, Koulibaly. I continue to be a Corey Kispert guy. All of that.
I like Kispert a lot too.
Yeah, and then like okay, so the same thing that we said with the Nets. Can you win on? Can you find some diamonds in the rough? Like I don't think we're going to see it this year, but does Sadiq Bey return to his rookie year form for you and becomes some sort of floor spacing wing 3-and-D?
When does he get back as well?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. I don't
right?
know if he'll play this year at all or not. And yeah, trying to look through any other interesting names here. And then they have this weird, to your point earlier, what do you do with Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma, and Malcolm Brogdon? Do you keep them around to facilitate the growth of these young guys? Are they happy doing that? And then if you do decide to trade them, when do you end up trading them? Do you at least play them to the deadline to help your guys? Do you keep them through the trade deadline? I would assume with Brogdon, you don't, because then he's just an unrestricted free agent, but it's all about the young guys and then positioning yourself to add one more piece to that puzzle.
Yeah, I think that's dead on. Like, you're just trying to, honestly, I don't even know if we need to go more than a couple of minutes on Washington. It's just, I'll close with this question. For this season particularly, out of that Sar, Bilal, Bub trio, who do you trust to be the most productive and have the best freshman or sophomore season?
Sar defensively, Bub offensively. Is that crazy?
I think I would also take Bub here. I think Sar is going to take a minute. Like, I've been
especially on offense. Especially on offense.
Yeah, like, I think Alex will be able to play early on, but it's going to be 15-minute bursts while he figures out everything with his game. The upside is still immense, but it's going to take him a minute. I think it's Bub. If you told me Bub ends up with a somewhat inefficient 15-5-5 year, I wouldn't be stunned by that at all.
He's got second team all rookie written all over him, and the only reason it's not first team is because his team doesn't win very many games.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, I think we're just going to call it there on Washington.
Cool. Yep.
All right, Bryce.
Trivia?
You know what time it is.
Let's do it.
It's trivia time. Are you ready?
Change it up on you this time. We're going historic here. Back to the 96-97 season, because that's where NBA.com cut it off. This past season, Sam, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander averaged 30+ points, 5+ assists, and 2+ steals for the Oklahoma City Thunder. That feat has happened 6 times since 96-97 by 5 different players. One player did it twice. Can you name me the players that did it? You do not have to tell me the seasons. 30 points, 5 assists, 2 steals in the past almost 30 seasons. I wish I could have went 30, but it didn't let me. 5 players.
Okay. I'm just updating the banner for people watching along on Twitter. YouTube. That's right. Okay. 35 and 2 steals. I would guess LeBron has done this.
LeBron has not done this. I was amazed. He never got the steal. So let me back up. He got the steals in his second year, but he only averaged 27 points per game that year, and never has averaged 2 steals per game since.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll let you get.
My next guess, just in terms of stats, is Russ has probably done this.
So I thought Russ was going to be another one as well, and Russ did not do it because he never. So he averaged 2.1 steals, only 28 points that year. 2 steals, only 24 points a game that year. Hasn't averaged 2 steals a game since. I was fascinated. That's why
Tracy McGrady.
So no Tracy McGrady. Let me pull his up. I had those 2 ready because I knew those would be guesses. McGrady never got the steals.
Huh.
Do you want me to give you? I'm trying to think of a good hint here.
Well,
So
I'm just going to keep going through like obvious names. Like Kobe is an obvious name to do this,
so Kobe
right?
Bryant did it in the 02-03 season. 30 points a game on 45, 38, 84, 5.9 assists, 2.2 steals. Kobe Bryant is one of the answers.
Steph does sneaky get steals, so I'm going to say Steph is another one.
Steph in the 15-16 season, 30.1 points on 50, 45, 91.
Yeah, it's one of the all-time seasons.
6.7 assists, 2.1 steals. There's two of them. You have three more names.
Did Dwayne Wade do this?
Dwayne Wade, 08-09, 30.2 points on 49, 32, 77, 7.5 assists, 2.2 steals. You have two players left, and one of these players did it twice.
Okay.
I have a hint,
I mean,
but
this is like
you're
an
on a roll.
anti defensive player. Like the Rockets played like such high tempo that like I can see Harden having like gotten the steals at some point.
18-19, 36.1 points on 44, 37, 88, 7.5 assists, and he barely made the steals with two. So you are missing one player, and it is the player that did it twice.
So I should get this like pretty clearly.
It is a all-time great. Like he is a really, really good player in the history of the game of basketball.
So Jokic has never done this. Giannis.
It is not Giannis. Thank you for spelling Antetokounmpo for me, Google. Giannis has never. You want to guess what the most steals Giannis has averaged in a season is?
I would have guessed probably
obviously two.
Yeah.
1.6, and that's a little bit of an outlier.
Okay, so wait. So 90, we're counting the 96-97 season.
Yeah.
Oh, so is this Jordan?
It is not
did it
Jordan.
In 96-97 and 97-98?
Jordan did not do it. Multiple seasons with 2 steals. I'll have to hash this out a little bit. So keep guessing. Oh, shoot. Yeah. So, okay. Jordan did do it in his career for what this is worth. He had a year where
do it in 96-97.
Yeah. He had a year where he averaged 35, 5.9 and 3.2 steals. So 96-90. Yeah. He never got the steals at that point in his career. Jordan did this multiple times. Jordan actually did this 6 years in a row.
Yeah, it's not surprising.
Michael Jordan was pretty good at basketball.
Hot take.
Hot take. Aggregate that, please. Michael Jordan good at basketball.
So all-time great. I'm like trying to run through like MVPs.
So
Iverson?
It is Allen Iverson.
Okay.
And so when I say all-time great, like Allen Iverson is my favorite player of
all-time
all time.
Great.
So
sure.
So I say I may have been a little strong. So 01-02, 31 points a game. We know he wasn't the most efficient. 5.5 assists, 2.8 steals. And then he did it in 04-05, 30.7 points, 7.9 assists, 2.4 steals.
Okay. That's a good one. I like that question a lot. I do like the historical ones. That's a fun one.
So I just started
enjoyable ones.
So essentially what I did was I just picked those 3 stats and then just narrowed it till I was like, man, that's a really awesome season for SGA. And then just went back through, and I was hoping there wouldn't be too many guys that did it, and it worked out pretty good. So for reference for everybody, Kobe 02-03, Curry 15-16, Wade 08-09, Harden 18-19, Iverson 01-02 and 04-05, along with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander this season.
That is an awesome question, Bryce. I
appreciate it.
That's one of my favorites that we've done so far on Trivia Time. That's a very good one. Okay, Bryce, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on.
Yep, at Motor City Hoops on Twitter. Lots of stuff going to start happening with the NBL Blitz coming up in just a few days, and draft and all of that. So start doing more there, putting out all my content, whether it's podcasts or Substack or whatever. Otherwise, right here on the Game Theory Podcast with Sam Vecenie.
I will be at the Blitz. So Bryce and I will probably talk about that a little bit on Monday before we do whatever our plan is for Monday. It could be the 25 to 29 draft. We will see. Not 100% sure on that though. Okay. Depends on, maybe we'll wait until Thursday to do Blitz stuff next week.
Sure.
Although I didn't want to make you do, I don't know. I might try and get you off the podcast next Thursday just to give you some lifetime. We'll figure that out. Okay. This Thursday, Bryce will be back though. We're going to do the Western Conference. So
Yep.
Go to The Athletic. Keep me employed over there. Until next time, we'll talk soon.